schools aren't the clubs inside the universities, right? But what really is the school? They say it's the entire university. But then later, I want you to just cross-apply the stuff they do in the spec argument, right? Because he's like, there are all kinds of clubs in universities. There's the honors council and the swim team and the student government and honor societies, like, and they get the money from these schools. That's what makes up a school, right? Well, what's the difference here? They're really trying to use a difference without a distinction. They're saying, like, we give the money to the schools and then the schools give it to clubs, right? But that's somehow, like, that's okay. But if we're just giving it to a club, that's not. Like, we believe the debate community, right? We're all students in universities. Like, we've been through university, or we're in a university, or for some reason we're part of that community, right? We're not apart from it. We're not like, oh, I'm not representing the University of Miami right now because I'm, a debater. Like, that's the whole reason we're here and we have team codes that we're, JV Miami. Like, there's a reason that, you're a representative of your school. And so the club, right, at the club level, that is part of the school. Because really, what are you funding if you're just giving a school money, right? Because it's not essentially, like, they really kind of misinterpret how federal funding for schools works in the status quo. Like, you don't just have block grants that go to schools, right? Like, hey, my University of Miami, here's just $10,000, no questions asked, or hey, FIU, here's some money, just, spend it however you want, right? Like, they're allocated for specific things, like for research, which, that's not a club in a university, that's a super specific department in a specific skill. That's, oh, you do oil research? We'll give you and you and you money, but the rest of the community can blow it, right? Anyone can join debate. Like, there's nothing preventing people from joining debate. Everyone in the school could join debate if they wanted to, right? It's a shame they don't, but the fact of the matter is, like, it's available to them. Opposed to oil research, I have to essentially be a mercenary intellectual and be like, oh yeah, I love oil companies, Texaco and whatever. And the problem, again, right, isn't the idea, I'm sorry, I'll get onto that. Anyway, okay, so standards, right? They say debatability, right, that it takes them away from colleges as a whole, but there's no reason that they can't debate that, right? They can talk about how, like, that it needed to be given to a college as a whole. Nowhere do we see a reason why, like, they need, nowhere is it shown why giving to a club is uniquely bad, right? Like, that still gives them the ground to talk about, like, why we should instead fund a university or fund a different club. So it's really not taking away the debatability. On top of that, they're indicting us on diction, saying it's the whole school, not like a program. Again, we believe that, like, being a unit of the school makes it part of it. That's how the funding works already. It's not this block grant process. It's parts of the university. So we're not advocating anything that's, like, completely ridiculous. On the issues, right, a priori voters, that's not the case here. Clearly we're topical. Like, we meet the definition of the resolution. Ground loss, there's no ground loss. They can talk about whatever they want. They can run a dissad as to why it shouldn't be, like, block grants. They can run a counterplan, give block grants to schools. Like, there's all kinds of stuff they can run, right? But they just choose not to run it. And then on top of that, there's loss of education. We believe there's actually a greater amount of education because of this, right? Because of the fact that we can talk about a specific issue in the debate program, rather than just kind of pie-in-the-sky ideas of, like, let's throw money at a university and hope that something happens, right? That's unrealistic. That's not how it is in the real world. We're talking about how funding works, right? And they fund specific programs. They fund specific departments. And we believe we have the best education in round. Also, we'd like to make this a reverse voter issue. They're just skewing our time. I spent like 3 minutes on this because, they're trying to make it like theory and topicality are big issues. On the spec, all right. Debate is just a program, not a whole school, is what they say. But then, right, the next thing they say is, like, we need to give it to schools so then they can trickle down to programs. Like, really, what are they advocating, right? Like, what is the specification here? If we go super specific, or rather, if we say let's give money to schools, then they hit us on vagueness, right? They're like, oh, what does your program actually do? Like, giving a block grant to a school doesn't do anything. They could be funding terrorists on their campus. Like, so pretty much the idea is, like, they're just trying to get us on either end, right? Like, vagueness or specificity. And we, I guess, erred on the side of being specific and trying to have a good debate with Clash here. Okay, so they're saying stock issues. Like, we did set up a legitimate debate. We showed the issues as to why, like, what the benefits are of funding debate leagues and how urban debate, how that trickles down, that helps society, that helps communities. This kind of stuff went unaddressed. And then they say, it's the government's burden, we fulfilled our burden in the debatability, saying we can't address the significance. They absolutely can. Again, like I said, they can run disads, they can run anything as to why we should not specifically do a club and they should do something else. This shouldn't be a theory issue. Again, voters, there's no ground loss. They can talk about even more stuff. They can just kill us on the idea that we don't do enough, right? They can be like, we should fund counterplans, fund this, and this in a school, and as a result now there's, all these better solvencies that they have, and they just don't do that. Again, education loss, we think we're the most realistic, and that's better for education. Fairness is clearly not unfair. Like, they're able to run a dissad, they're able to go on case. Like, it's just purely not unfair. Okay, on to the dissad. Okay, first of all, they're saying right now students aren't filling out their FAFSA, and that's an important thing. This is non-unique. Like, how does any plan force a human being to solve the FAFSA, right? Like, no matter if you pass legislation, like, so what? Like, people still aren't going to file the FAFSA. Like, people are lazy. People procrastinate. Deadlines show up. People don't know. Like, there are a whole bunch of issues that happen that make the FAFSA not even linked to this thing. Like, first of all, it's a total link of omission. How are we supposed to know? Like, the only way that we can meet this is if we debate the FAFSA. It's essentially what they're talking about. That's not the direction we chose to go. As a government, we have the ability to set the debate, we have the ability to set the resolution. The resolution wasn't we should deal with FAFSA, the resolution was funding education, right? And third of all, FAFSA goes to students. FAFSA is not even educational funding. Like, FAFSA is for you, so that's your ability to apply, like, to then go to college, right? So don't address any of their impacts.
Specific to college and university, it goes to students instead of...
Right, it goes to students, not to universities, right? So, and then on top of this, right, they're saying that, right, students are going to go to college because they don't have the funding, right? We're going to go ahead and turn this and say that we're on the cusp of an education bubble burst. What's happening is there's so many kids coming out of universities just that are essentially, especially a lot of those for-profit colleges right now, which are they're just like diploma mills. It's in an era where we have so many educated people that their education is not even worth the paper it's printed on, that their diploma is printed on, right? Like a bachelor's qualifies you to drive a taxi cab because there's so many people with bachelors, right? That's why a lot of you debate coaches are judges and coaches are master's students or PhD students, or you've made a career in it and you're teaching in the education, right? Because you have to be super educated now in the world because there are so many people with bachelor's degrees. It's kind of seen in America as that's the thing you do, you go to college. The problem is people are taking out student loans in other areas, and what this causes is another thing with the housing crisis. People can't pay back their student loans, they don't have a degree that'll actually get them a job retention, It doesn't get them the job they can pay back what they've taken out in loans, and this is actually bad to have too many educated people. Alright, moving on, rather college degree holding people. Okay, so on to the debate here. Okay, first of all, pretty much our debate advantage essentially went untouched, right? Right now we say there's funding loss. They actually conceded this. They say there are like budget cuts already. Like, we agree, it's detestable how the budgeting works right now, and that's why we shouldn't be wasting money on oil, the federal government spending on oil research, right? Texaco and Exxon Valdez and all these people are already paying their own researchers, right? So like, if you're in oil, if that's your thing, right? They said it's going to put oil research out of business. If that's your deal, just go to Texaco and be like, guys, I'm doing a lot of good work in this. I'd like some money from you. They do it right now in the status quo. We just say the government funds shouldn't be funding something like that, right? If you go down, our plan provides funding, right? It's going to cause civic engagement, things like UDL, which that's what we're trying to do at our school right now. Like our debate program, we've been trying really hard to, the UDL program went down. We used to work with UDL, and we can't do that now. If we had a little more funding, we would be able to do things like that. Work with the Urban Debate League, and we know that there are other teams in this room who have funding issues that with just a little more money, they could do a lot more, right? Including engaging the civic community, which we think is one of the most important parts of debate, right?
This is debate's a small population.
Onto this, right? So, okay, he says it's too small of a population, right? But half of that problem is because we don't have funding, we can't advertise. That's how our school, we just went through this entire process of trying to get money from student government so that we could advertise ourselves on campus. People were on there, debaters, policy debaters in high school, who didn't even know we had a club on campus. Like, that's half the problem. A little bit more funding for policy debate solves this problem. Not enough people on campus. Okay, so on the term environment. All right, they say that, again, yeah, I addressed this, I'm sorry, it wasn't on the flow, but it was, they say that it's going to put these people out of business, right? It's going to put these scholars on oil, who do for the oil subsidies, going to put them out of business. They can still apply to oil companies for the money rather than getting the federal government grant.